able to finish our meeting and be able to go home. We never know what's going to happen with the weather, but we enjoy the moments. I know you do. And enjoying the time to be with you, got to be able to visit with you more, and I appreciate that very much, and appreciate what you're doing in your work here. When we think about our marriages, we begin to realize that indeed it can be a wreck if I get it up there, right? You try it again. There we go. My marriage is a wreck. That's probably a very negative way to stand on it, but I'm trying to solve the problem. If there is a problem in your marriage, you may think it's a wreck, and you'll see why I use that word in just a few moments. But when we begin to realize that God has an answer to that, we find, where's that answer? It's in Ephesians, the 5th chapter. It's one of the places we're going to start in just a few moments. But I want us to realize, if it's a wreck, that indeed we can go to God and realize He can help. He can make it indestructible. That's the focus I want to have. Too many marriages are breaking up, and we see the percentages all the time. It's too high. And we begin to realize, well, how can I, if it's a wreck, how can I keep it from ever getting there? And I think Bible teaches us that. And we're going to help get that in our minds this evening. So I hope you'll be able to follow along with me with that. In Ephesians, the 5th chapter, we begin to look at the context in which we find, beginning with verse 22, when he speaks about the idea of the marriage relationship. And I want us just to briefly go through the very first verse, Ephesians 5:1, be ye therefore imitators of God as beloved children. You're then to walk in love. Paul writes to the Corinthians to flee fornication, but Paul says here to the Ephesians, don't even let it be named among you. For fornication, all uncleanness or covetous, let it not even be named among you. Well, we're to walk in love. We're to find that we're to walk in the light as we proceed through the chapter. And light has fruit. You know, walking in the light, the flashlight, did you know has fruit? It's goodness and righteousness and truth. And when we do that, I want you to realize you've reached the pinnacle of what's fitting in the Lord, proving what is well-pleasing unto the Lord by walking in the light, walking in the love. We're not to have fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but we don't stay quiet, do we? We rather reprove them. Light is going to expose the darkness, and that becomes very, very important. We're to, verse 15, we're to walk carefully among the world that we live in. Not as unwise, but as wise. We're redeeming the time. Appreciate the prayer. We have a few days left. We don't want to waste any of that because we live in an evil world and somebody needs to hear the words of God that we're setting forth to them. We're not to be kind of controlled by wine or alcohol, but He works right in there. But we're to be in our spirits to be worshiping unto God. And we're to be driven and driven by the Spirit of God through His Word, and we worship God acceptably. And then he makes the statement in verse 21, subjecting yourselves one to another in the fear of Christ. The idea of subjecting ourselves to each other person. And then he begins with a marriage relationship. Walk in the light, walking in the love. How to come back and walk in love? Because Jesus gave you the example, verse 1, that He gave Himself up to die for us, and He offered up a sacrifice to God for an odor of a sweet smell. And all of those things are what the Christian life should be like, but we can be married or we don't have to be married. But in the marriage relationship, there was this relationship, you could say, subjecting yourself to one another. Yes, even the husband in some way, and we're going to look at that, is subjecting himself to the needs of his wife. And she's subjecting herself to the authority of the husband. But we're all realizing that we're going to be pure in our relationship. No fornication is even going to be named among us. So our marriage can be held together. And a lot of it will be because we are involved as Christians. That's why it's so important to marry a Christian. Now, there can be Christians on the roll that are not living right. But having this character, that's what a Christian should be. That would be a great person to marry if you're contemplating that. And to realize that that's the character that you're bringing in to the relationship. So we begin to realize, how can we make it indestructible? Let's follow the word of God and see that's there. I want to first of all begin with the contrast of God's wisdom. If we're going to make this thing indestructible, how would you, or how does man usually describe the idea of how wives and husbands, what relationship should they be? And we began to see in God's word something that's different, because man's wisdom is this. And I've talked to people like this. Well, you want me to submit to my husband? I'll tell you what, why don't you let them speak first to the husbands? And children may say, I can obey my parents if they treat me right. Begin with the parents, begin with my father, and I'll tell you, well, am I going to obey or not? You could have been a slave in the first century, and you could have had people that oversaw your life, and they were not necessarily good. You said, talk to the masters first before you talk to the slaves. And that's not how God addresses this letter. This letter was read in churches in the order that we have them. Because what we began to see is that in every case, the one doing the submitting comes first. God speaks to the one doing the submitting. The wife first, the husband. The children first, then the fathers. The master first, then the slaves. And it doesn't change in the scriptures. Begin to realize, well, that's not the way I would think it would work. Let's just see if they treat you right, then we can do the submitting. God didn't start that way, and there's a reason for that. Because the Bible is going to teach us a better way to look at that. So let's realize that God's wisdom is not like ours. Why would he start with the ones having to do submitting to one that's over them in authority? Let's see how he does that. It's the same thing found in Colossians 3. He said, well, over here in Colossians 3, we have another possibility, but it's wives first, then the husbands, then the children, then the fathers, the slaves, and the masters. Well, maybe it's different over here in 1 Peter 3, 1 through 7. He deals with the wife first, and he deals with the husband. And I think it's interesting about the order. And it helps to really illustrate the fact of why he wouldn't do it this way, because what's going to keep it being indestructible is your service unto the Lord, not somebody else. You're going to be involved in serving the Lord, and that starts with our wives. He starts there first. I'm going to start there first. And what we begin to see there is the wife is to be in submission to her husband as unto the Lord. Who gets in the way between the wife and the Lord? Who comes into between those two? Not that he's going to take them away from the Lord, but who she's not to be submitting to him because he's handsome, because he may lose his good looks. He tells funny jokes. I think I can spend my life with him, but the jokes get stale. What's going to happen then? They turn out to be a wreck. But your submission is to the Lord, as unto the Lord, because he's never done you wrong. He will never change. There's no variables here. It will always be solid in that relationship with the wife and the husband, because you're serving the Lord. He just got in the way, and he's been blessed because he has a godly woman, one who's serving the Lord. Now, if he says, I want you to go across down an highway, go on to Mexico, I want you to bring back, I want you to double stack those pills, because we can get them in that bottle, and you carry them in your purse. Nobody ever find you. Then you get caught. If you're a wife that's going to say, no, I can't do that, husband. Well, you're supposed to be involved in obeying me in everything. Isn't that correct? He says that. Paul puts in this context that as Jesus is the head of the church, he's a savior of the body. Even so, the church needs to be, as a body, be in subjection unto him in everything. Well, he's relating the relationship of husband and wife with the church in everything. It's not some things. It is in everything you're to submit to him. I'm not going to go get and cheat and try to bring in pills for you. I'm not going to go get your alcohol for you. I'm serving the Lord. And you're serving the Lord that if he has problems with those things, so like drugs or alcohol, you're not enabling him to continue that. You're in a way trying to stop that. But your service is always unto the Lord. Understand what the will of the Lord is. Do not have fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness. Rather, reprove them. That's the context. That's the Christian. And here is a wife that I am willing to submit unto my husband because I'm submitting as unto the Lord, and it's in everything. We may discuss things. You make the final decision, and I'll go. I'll go where you go, as Ruth said. And we begin to realize, well, now we don't have a problem with who's in authority. I remember having a couple, and they said, we're 50-50. We do 50%, who's in charge. And their marriage didn't last very long because they don't follow the wisdom of God. And it becomes a problem. Too many chiefs, not enough Indians type of thing. So we begin to realize that here is the submission of the wife unto the husband. And the reason he didn't start with the husbands first is because the Lord is in the center of this marriage. It wasn't about him. And I wonder what kind of man he's going to be later on down the road. Can I trust him? All those things are variables. You take that out of the picture when you being with someone, dating someone, knowing someone long enough. I'm going to be that man's wife, and because I'm going to serve him, because I'm going to serve it as unto the Lord. And he will be the very blessed man in the world when that happens. Now, when we think about in Colossians 3 at verse 18, Paul says the same thing to the wives, because it is fitting in the Lord. It is proper. It's exactly the way it ought to be for the wife to be in submission unto her husband in everything in Ephesians 5. So I want us to think that is the standard by which we are to follow. Let's talk about the husband for a moment. In Ephesians 5:25, we begin to realize that he is supposed to love his wife. So here he is loving his wife as Christ loved the church. Now, he's serving the Lord as well, but what he has in this indestructible marriage is the example that he can always follow every day of his life. I need to love my wife even as Christ loved the church. How did he love the church? We all know, we have in Scripture. He gave himself up for the church. He died for his body, the church. And there's not a greater example of love. Laid down his life for his friends. He laid down his life for his enemies. And you think about that can be in your mind all the rest of your life, and you'll never have a better example to follow, because God's wisdom is to make your marriage indestructible. And when you love like that, you may have a woman that will submit to you like that, like God would have us to do. And we begin to realize that this is the standard I need to follow as I love the church. I only have one daughter, so I have a son. But when my daughter was contemplating getting married, she dated some guys, and she's a very, very beautiful lady. She dated a lot of guys, and none of them I wanted. None of them I like, okay? It was some okay. But she began being a godly girl. She realized there's things that just not going to work. And she was dating. She wasn't the idea of being married. But I didn't know there was a little boy, a young man, in a church where I preached. I've been there. I preached there for over 47 years now. So I've raised kids, and I'm getting grandkids and all that sort of thing. But this young boy, he's about a little bit older than she. I never knew he would be interested in her. I baptized him when he was a teenager, but he was always there. But when he found out that guy wasn't going to work out, he didn't waste any time, and he came into her life. And I asked him one day when he came to ask for the hand of my daughter, gave me respect, would you die for her? Without blinking an eye, I said, I surely would. Isn't that the example? I might say I'd die for you, but I'll tell my wife, you go open that door first, and I'll be behind you. That's not the way to be. No, you're going to take a bullet. You're leading the way. And he was that type. He's been that type of man. He's an elder in our church now, and he's doing a very fine job. And there's a sense of the character of someone that we need to recognize who we're going to marry. And that becomes very, very important. Secondly, in verses 28 through 30, begin to realize you need to love your wife as your own body. So here's the other part. How do you like your body? How do you like it to be treated? And it's interesting to me that you put those two examples together. You have both the physical and sustaining of the physicality and the well-being of your wife, but also there's a spiritual side of that. Here's the physical side. You love your wife as your own body. What do you? I want my body to be fed, and I want it to therefore nourished, as the text says, and I want it to be cherished in the sense of kept warm and protective. All those things are there in the responsibilities of the man that's going to be called a husband. And there's a sense of you care about your body like that. You're having to be involved with someone else and someone else's well-being, and you're going to save the body, yes, but he also did that in order to have the body cleansed from sin, that he might sanctify it, having cleansed it by the washing of water with the word, that he might present the church to himself when he comes back again, a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that it should be holy and without blemish. Oh, I'll pay the bills. I'll make money for you. But the spiritual side, sometimes they have no clue. And there's a sense that I'm going to help her spiritually to have no spot or wrinkles when we go to the marriage feast. We're going to live faithfully. We're not perfect, but we're going to live godly and faithfully and do the best we can and serve the Lord. And honey, you're serving the Lord. That's why I'm being blessed. And I'm going to bless you because I'm going to love you as not only my own body, but I got the great example to follow as Christ. And yes, I will die for you. Now, you talk about a relationship that can work. That's it. But notice who he talked to first. He always talked to the one doing the submitting, and then he speaks to the one that is going to be in authority. And he does that for the fathers and the masters to teach them that this is the type of person you ought to be. And I believe, this is my opinion, that a woman is willing to submit to a man like that, and a man that has a wife like that, he's going to honor her. It's going to be indestructible as far as that relationship is concerned, because you're submitting yourself to one another in that particular sense. Colossians 3 verse 19 says we care about the wife, the husband does, not to be bitter against her, that she become bitter. That's sharp, harsh, and it can come with a fist and it can come with words. And men abuse women because that way, because they have the power. I can get by with it, and we're finding that that's not so. We'll never get by with that with God, and that destroys relationships. And he said, don't be bitter against her. That's part of God's plan as well. And then the help in the Lord is the fact that we're going to make it indestructible, is that we're going to realize that we just can't just separate. God has addressed that too. And Matthew 19 and verse 6, we see how the marriage and divorce issue came up in the scriptures, because the Pharisees, can a man put away his wife for every cause? There were rabbis speaking in during that time where they had different opinions. Some that, no, you couldn't do that. You could burn the toast, as is being applied in people's lives back then, and you could put away. What say you, Jesus, Rabbi? What do you say about it? And here's how he dealt with it. Have you not read that he who made from the beginning made them male and female? And he said, for this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they two shall become one flesh. So that there are no more two, but one flesh. What therefore God had joined together, our verse 6, what therefore God had joined together, let not man put asunder. Where does Jesus take us back to? To the beginning. And what did he do in the beginning? He made male and female. And by the way, that sounds like, if that's the beginning, according to evolutionary theory, we're closer to this idea than all the time that came about. How could that be the beginning when we're closer to the time than about man being created? He said that was the beginning. That tells me that evolutionary theory's got to missing something. Jesus said in the beginning, when he made the earth, we created the earth. We talked about that in our opening lesson. On that sixth day, he made male and female. And so then in chapter 2, we begin to have the marriage relationship talked about. So here we see that in the beginning he made them, and it's male and female, and we have to kind of argue about that today, don't we, with the world? What's a male? What's a female? They're trying to interchange them. They're trying to be involved in that. And then, so that's the relationship between the two that can be married together, be married. But he said, what God joins together, let not man put asunder. Don't separate. And we would call that don't divorce. One reason we do that is because we know God hates divorce. In Malachi saw the times where the people of Judah, as he's dealing with, and Israel, they were involved in not serving God, and they were treating each other bad as well. And so he begins to speak about the injustice that has been done to each other as brethren. And we pick up in Malachi, this second chapter, just to lay that groundwork for that, where they were treating one another treacherously, and they were not caring about how they treated each other, but they also treated their wives in a way that wasn't seemly as well. And they were involved in causing the altars to fill with tears. And we begin to realize that God is against that. And he mentions this all together in Malachi, the second chapter. He said, Jehovah will cut off to the man that with him that walketh with him and answereth out of the tents of Jacob, and him that offereth an offering unto Jehovah of hosts. So you treat your fellow brother in the wrong way, you're going to pay for that. But he said, this again you do. So it wasn't just like, I'm treating my brethren wrongly. No, now we're dealing with the marriage relationship. This again you do. You cover the altar of Jehovah with tears and weeping and with sighing, insomuch that he regardeth not the offering anymore, neither receive it with good will at your hand. Who's crying? Well, it could be different opinions. Is God crying because he sees the injustice done to your wife? Or are those tears of your wife because she's being treated so badly? The sign, the insomuch they regard to the point that he doesn't regard the offering anymore from you. Yet you say, wherefore? Because Jehovah hath been witness between thee and the wife of thy youth, against whom thou hast dealt treacherously, though she is thy companion and the wife of thy covenant. Two things that should have been strong in the mind of Judah is that here was something in my youth and having that relationship with the opposite sex, male, female, and what a joy that is. She's been my companion. And then secondly, it's a wife of thy covenant, oh God. God has made a promise. This is the relationship that he likes, and you've destroyed it. You're no longer going to be a companion because you're put in her way. And they were flippant in doing that. And Malachi's addressing this. And he said in verse 15, he did not make one, although he had the residue of the Spirit? He could have made all sorts of nations. But he says, wherefore one, he sought a godly seed. Judah, Israel, that's my people. Therefore take heed to your spirit, and let none deal treacherously against the wife of his youth. I hate divorce. I hate putting away. Some of the older translations said Jehovah, the Lord God of Israel. And him that covereth his garment with violence, said Jehovah of hosts, therefore take heed to your spirit that you deal not treacherously. God hates it. How come we do it? It's so easy to be done. We realize we're in a covenant relationship with God, and therefore we need to honor that relationship. He hates divorce, and therefore it's something that allows the marriage to be permanent. How permanent is that? Matthew 19:9, there's only given, while God may have tolerated, we're not going to look at Deuteronomy, but he may have tolerated divorce under the law of Moses, as he'll say, well, Moses told us to give a bill of divorcement. But you read that part about that law, it was dealing with things. What happens when something happens? What happens when you do put her away? You better give her a bill of divorcement so she could be another man's wife, but you better watch it because you can never have her back. Even if that husband dies that she's going to, you can never back. It's abomination. It was to slow down the divorce until the fullness of time came, where Jesus comes and now he lays down this law, where indeed not to put asunder, but he gives one reason for divorce to take place, of putting away, that allows one, the innocent party, to marry another that has a right to. I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, exception, except for fornication, and shall marry another, committeth adultery. And he that marrieth her when she's put away committeth adultery. Adulterers going to be going to hell. And here's one divorce that it might affect 4 souls in the end. Yours, the one you marry, your ex-wife now, and the one she marries, and her soul. And we're in a covenant relationship with God, if that's happened among brethren, and those things are going to occur. He said there's only one reason that can happen, and that's for fornication. That's why you marry a woman, you marry a man that says fornication is not even going to be named among me. That's what's Ephesians 5. And that's not going to be a part. It's till death do us part, as we shall see. That's the only reason for this reason. You could put away for that reason, and you have a right, you weren't cause of fornication, right to marry another. And it won't be adultery. We see that in Romans 7, verse 2, where the Apostle Paul is really stressing something else that is important about dying to the old law, and now we can serve God. And you had to deal with the old law because it was holy, righteous, and good. You just don't say this is trash. It was holy, righteous, good, but it never could make you righteous. But it's all right to die to that. It's all right to put that away from you and die to that, and then be married to someone else. But it was a point of death that was occurring here. The old law died. Now you could, as a Christian, serve God under the new covenant. But it's in this context we learn about marriage too, because it's an example that he gives for us that I think is instructive. He says, for the woman that hath a husband is bound by law to the husband while he liveth. But if the husband die, she's discharged from the law of the husband. So then if while husband liveth, she be joined to another man, she'll be called an adulteress. If the husband die, she's free from the law, so that she's not an adulteress, though she'll be joined to another man. We're not talking about having an affair. We're talking about marriage. Both times joining together. If your husband that you're married to is not dead and you depart and you're joined to another man, you will be an adulteress. But you could be joined to another man and not be an adulteress. Same relationship, marriage. It wasn't, well, you just can't have an affair here. It's marriage. And the point is that you're free from the law of the husband if he dies. The law of Moses, death took place so we could be married to another. That's the Lord. And we bring forth fruit unto his glory. That's the connection. But there's that marriage relationship. You say, well, only death can separate you. You can be separated rightfully before God with one reason for fornication. So this idea, well, you can never remarry, that's not true. Jesus says there's a reason for that you could. And we'll begin to realize that here's the permanence of it, till death do us part. I remember attending a wedding where the Methodist preacher, I know there's certain ways they have to say the marriage ceremony, according to their creeds and so forth. But he made the statement that given all these promises he didn't say till death do us part, instead until love departs. You promise to do all these until love departs. Well, that might be next week. I don't love him anymore. I don't love her anymore. And well, that's the way. That's how permanent it is. But it's till death do us part. And it's saying it exactly the same thing. Death parts us. Till death do us part. It sounds kind of poetic, but death separates us, is the point that's been made. And other than that, you have one exception. Otherwise, you're going to be joined together. And when we realize I'm serving the Lord as a wife, and the husband is just being blessed by that, and you're following the example of Jesus Christ, you're in a covenant relationship, God has joined you together, you know that, you're going to realize we're not going to separate this real quickly. But what happens if you marry somebody in the world, and I'm going to convert them, and that's a wonderful thing. 1 Peter 3 says you might do it. But what we realize is that here's this point. Well, how can I have a marriage that's going to be indestructible? You marry a person that is in line with the Lord, you may have a son-in-law like I have, that grew up knowing truth and knowing what you ought to be. God's here to help us. He's there to help us to have a marriage that's true. Marriage is supposed to be had in honor, Hebrews 13:4, among all. And the bed to be undefiled, stressing that sexual relationship. God's going to judge all adulterers and all fornicators. And all that covers all aspects of the relationship that one could have. Fornication is a very broad term that involves, well, that's just between single people. Well, in that context, some context it might be there, but fornication, he says, who puts away for fornication after you're married? Fornication was a broad term denoting all sexual immorality. Sad to say, they would include animal bestiality, include homosexuality, it includes everything that's unlawful before God. That's why the term is there. Well, it ought to be adultery if they're married. But the adultery is adulterating that relationship of marriage. But fornication, even before we're married, adultery when after we're married, it matters not. Those two items are together that indeed people lose their souls over that. And so it's not a well, take it or leave it type of a doctrine. It's exactly the way God would have it. Let the marriage bed be undefiled. And turn with me to 1 Thessalonians 4, verses 3 through 7, because the Apostle Paul stresses about the problem with fornication, and that where we stand in, we need to be in control of our own bodies. This is the will of God, even your sanctification, that you abstain from fornication, that each one of you know how to possess himself of his own vessel in sanctification and honor. I have a responsibility, you have a responsibility to keep your body and your desires under control, according to the teachings of God. Not in the passion of lust, even as the Gentiles who know not God, that no man transgress and wrong his brother in the matter, because the Lord is an avenger of these things, as also ye forewarned you and testified. Maybe one example of wronging a brother in these things connected with fornication, you've had an affair with his wife. You've wronged your brother. And the relationships in the church will be affected by this. Not only the relationship between the husband and the wife, but don't wrong your brother. You stay away from the fornication and the adultery that would take place. It is a holy relationship, and it's one that indeed we need to realize, as maybe was in our honeymoon, you put out do not disturb sign on your honeymoon. That's the way the marriage ought to be. Do not disturb. We're not going to allow anything to get into our lives that will lead us away from that. I'm learning today that there's indeed apps that you can get, and it's kind of cheating on your wife, but it really isn't cheating, as they're saying. I think the world's just trying to corrupt us. But it's all right maybe to have this going on, and you're looking at pictures, you're looking at things, but you don't have to tell your wife about it. It's secret. Well, that could be happening. So people say, well, I'm going to check things out. And relationships are going to be destroyed because you're allowing something to come into that relationship and you're keeping it separate. And that's the relationship that you can be naked with one another, not be ashamed. You know someone that's special. And that's what that relationship is. You don't hide things that especially can disrupt the marriage. The world says nothing wrong with that. But God says we got to keep ourselves pure and have a holy relationship. It's going to be permanent because of God's teachings, Old and New Testament. Now, we go to 1 Peter 3. There's order there, because here is the example of, here is a woman that's apparently a Christian, or at least has become one, and her husband hasn't. So at this moment, she's a Christian and he's not. And we're going to see this point about subjection again in this passage. In like manner, ye wives, be in subjection to your own husbands, that even if any obey not the word, they may without the word be gained by the behavior of their wives. So if any obey not the word, that's probably the gospel. They haven't obeyed the gospel yet. They indeed will be won by the behavior of their wives, beholding their chaste behavior coupled with fear. So we may, without the word, sometimes maybe not the gospel, but the idea of without wordiness. So you can say, well, that's not what he meant here, but I think he means that here. If they obey not the word, that they may without the word be gained. Well, which is it? Without your wordiness, without you speaking to him all the time, and maybe badgering the person to be doing something that you want to do. That's not they haven't obeyed the word yet. But you know how they're going to be gained? By the behavior, not your wordiness, by the behavior of your wives who are chaste and see that and coupled with reverence. That man knows you're reverencing him. He's not a Christian. That man knows that. He's also seeing your chaste behavior. And that wins him if he's going to be one. And that's what he says to do. So who's adorning? Let it not be the outward adorning of the braiding of the hair, the wearing of jewels, of gold, or putting on apparel. He's not condemning that, but he's emphasizing the next being greater. But this is what is important. Let it be the hidden man of the heart. What is it? It's an incorruptible apparel of a meek and quiet spirit. Incorruptible apparel. You buy new clothes. After a while, you're going to have to get new clothes. They wear out, don't they? Threadbare. They wear out. And that's going to happen. I want incorruptible apparel. And every woman has that within her, and every man can have the right attitude as well. But here is the woman that is in a special relationship with her husband, submitting unto his authority. We know we're supposed to do that. He stresses that again. But what wins him is not your say, why don't you go to church midnight? You can invite them and all those things, or just why don't you obey the gospel yet? Just badgering. Do what's inside you. Let that shine. The incorruptible pair of a meek and quiet spirit. What is that combination? Meek and quiet. Meekness says, I'll bring my power. I may be smarter than my husband. I have better sense than my husband. We're not arguing all that. Women can be real smarter than their husband. That's not the point. It's the point that indeed you're going to submit to him, and your meekness is that I'll bring myself and all my abilities under control of following your lead. Now, I may have some suggestions, and the husband loves you enough to hear them, and it could work back and forth. But you're not going to take over that headship. And I've seen how that destroys relationships, and I've seen it mended too. I know a couple that years ago, I would go up to their apartment. They were separated, and just the wife was there. She didn't want to talk to anybody, and now they're faithful members now. But it took the man to have to start saying, I'm supposed to be the head of this house and the head of my family. And he started acting that way. And she realized what she was to do. And they have a harmonious relationship, been there for years. It can be corrected if we follow God's pattern. And God says, this is what you need to win him with. And let it be the hidden man of the heart. You know what? It's in the sight of God a great price. Sight of God a great price. For after this manner aforetime, the holy women also, who hoped in God, adorned themselves. How they adorn themselves? Being in subjection to their own husbands. And he gives an example. What did he give? Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord. Now, is that going to be a killer for your wedding? Don't you say I have to submit to him by calling him Lord. I had a girl tell me that. You're not going to do my wedding because I used that passage. Well, you think about Sarah, and there's only one time in the Bible I read about her calling him Lord. You turn me to Genesis, the 18th chapter. In that chapter, a lot of things have happened until we come to this point. But I'll say verse 12. Sarah laughed within herself. She'd been told that she's going to have a child, and with Abraham. Said, after I'm waxed old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord, being old also? Who's the old guy there? It's Abraham, isn't it? She called him Lord. It's the only place I read where she calls him Lord. And I've seen some people say, well, I've got to call him Lord every morning. I said, well, it might sound good for a while. But that's not what we're saying. Yes, Lord, I'll go do this. Yes, Lord, I'll do that because I've got to say Lord to you. That's not what we're talking about. And I think it's exemplified here. Look what happened earlier in the day. Genesis 18. Jehovah appeared unto him through these messengers from heaven. And Abraham recognized their authority, and he began to be real busy. In fact, he was so busy, Abraham in verse 6 hastened into the tent unto Sarah and said, make ready quickly 3 measures of fine meal, excuse me, and knead it and make cakes. And how hurried was he? Was he in a hurry? He ran unto the herd to fetch a tender and good calf unto the servant. He hasted and dressed it. He was in a hurry. So what did he do? Here was one created to be a help meet to him. And he said, quickly, take these 3 measures of meal. That's a lot of quarts. And I want you to knead it and make cakes. She didn't call him Lord. Yes, Lord, I'll do that. She didn't do that, did she? The only time she ever called him Lord is when she's reflecting upon the character of her heart, how she felt about him. My Lord is old also. So it's not, I had to say that all the time, or you got me browbeating where I have to call you Lord. That's not what he's saying here, is that Sarah recognized that relationship to her. And so when he comes in, she didn't say, I can imagine somebody telling me, hey, kick it yourself. I don't have time to do this either. Sarah did it. And she submitted to him, and she did call him Lord. And that became very, very important. Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose children you now are and do well, and if are not put it in fear of any terror. See, here's a woman that's godly. She talk about the meek spirit, but what's the quiet part? The quiet part is that I'm okay with it. Quiet is not talking about your verbiage. It's talking about how you feel within yourself. And there are many women in our world today that they realize I've got to submit to my husband, and they are agitated by it. They revolt against it, and it will cause a relationship to disintegrate. Not in the Lord, it won't, because she willingly is going to submit to that as unto the Lord. So she has a meek and quiet spirit. She's quiet with that. She's okay with that. And she's going to use that to have a good influence upon a man that's not even a Christian yet, because he sees deep down that wonderful prize that he has of a woman that is chaste with all of her behavior. So what is this order of obedience? It's kind of without fear by terror. What will that man who's not a Christian, what he's going to do to me if he doesn't want me to go to church anymore? What is he going to do to me? He lays down the law, I want you to do this, and you can't do that as a Christian. Are you going to fear? No, you don't fear their fear. You're serving the Lord, and that's the way it's supposed to be. And then on the other side of the husband, he's going to be serving the Lord without being one who's authority over them. It's going to be absent of despotism. You husbands, in like manner, dwell with your wives according to knowledge. Well, we're different. One's from Mars and one's from Venus. How could I ever understand her? Well, you figure it out because God said do it. You dwell with her according to knowledge. You figure her out. And you begin to honor her as the weaker vessel. The makeup, as we've seen in sports and see how males who want to be females, they can't change biology. They can't do that. They're stronger. And that's the same thing. A man doesn't abuse that. He honors that. He cherishes that. And he says that indeed that you're according to knowledge, giving honor unto the woman as the weaker vessel, as being joint heirs of the grace of life. We're joint heirs, got God's grace, and the husband got God's grace. We're all equal there. To the end that your prayers be not hindered. God's not going to listen to your prayers if you don't treat your wife correctly. God's not going to hear our prayers for forgiveness if someone we don't forgive. So there's always that in the New Testament to check us and to realize you need to get back in place. Now, here's this relationship. I can be in charge. I can have authority. I can demand you submit to me because you're my wife, that sort of thing, without despotism. It's without idea that, and kind of putting fine china in a place where you want to be seen. You appreciate that only for special occasions. That's how special she is. And with that relationship, you can indeed have one that is indeed pleasing in the sight of the Lord. And I think it becomes real important about the relationships. And I can't help but think about Emma Montz right now, especially being here on this occasion when she has passed away. And you looked at what I knew about her. She's a great example of one who indeed had a meek and quiet spirit, but she had a strong, resolute faith. She's going to stand for the truth. Why is there a church here that stands for the truth of the gospel I just preached about marriage, divorce, and marriage? Why do we have that here? She had a part in that. And she's tried here in the Northwest to get elders who were teaching things and preachers who were teaching things there. She tried to study with them. She always had the meek and quiet spirit in her relationship with the opposite sex. And yet she was strong in faith, and she knew this could not be polluted. And there's a group here right now I'm facing over Zoom. It's because of her dedication, her example, and her marriage was not easy, was it? Her relationship with her husband, it became to be something that would tear the children apart. Well, what's happened? They've seen that meek and quiet spirit operation over the years, and I remember all that happening with their children. And they come to see the truth instead of going with a husband that didn't want to be involved in that. And I just think we think about how can we do that? Can we live that way? She did. And I'm just grateful there's a church here standing for truth of the gospel on all things, but especially on that particular subject. And God bless you for that. But I'm thankful that I've got to know Elma, and I know some of you had that part too. But she's the reason we have something like this, and I'm thankful for that. Self-esteem, he honors you. You're the weaker vessel, but he places you in honor. You have self-esteem because you're giving in to this, but you're not giving in to the devil. You're not giving in to the world. You're submitting to your husband as unto the Lord, honoring him, and not going to fear the fear. I'm going to stand fast for the Lord. And we can do that. We've seen example with Elma. Indestructible marriage in the Lord, as we bring the lesson closer to the close. What we've seen is respectful submission and sacrificial love in the Lord. That's what that marriage relationship in Ephesians 5 is all about. That indeed respectful submission. He started with the woman first, with the wife first. It's respectful submission. I'm going to reverence him. Doesn't mean we can't have communication. I think that's going to be a wrong move. And I have found in my being married over 50 some odd years is the fact there's been a lot of times I had the wrong plan. And it's good to listen. It's good to listen to see what I have to say. Doesn't mean, but I have to make that decision. But we can help one another. And there's communication. There's respectful submission that my wife has to me that I appreciate that. And it's a sacrificial love that I'm going to give her in the relationship. That's all in the Lord. In the Lord. And there'll come a time when, as I said earlier, age comes on, and how can your marriage stay together when youth is no longer there, and the beauty of youth is no longer there? It's changing, changing, changing. How come that can continue to be solid? Because I never submitted to you because of your personality. That may have attracted me. I'm submitting to you as unto the Lord. He hasn't changed. That's what makes it solid. Why marry a man who's going to have that sacrificial love of Christ? It is indeed permanent. It's that which will last till death do us part. And what we find there is that self-esteem and open communication, the marriage is not only indestructible, it thrives. You grow old together. You grow together and respect one another, have the memories there and have the challenges, and we've overcome them together. That's a wonderful relationship. And the final point is that I want us to realize it's to be enjoyable. We see all these restrictions, and sometimes we think, oh, I don't want to obey him and call him Lord. And we got to think through the passages, and it's not as bad as you think it is, but it's harmoniously having something that is going to stay together while you grow together and you change together. That relationship will be solid, but it's to be a joyful one. In Ecclesiastes, the 9th chapter, Solomon gives wonderful things about life under the sun. So we're living life under the sun. We're not going to be married in heaven. It's only for this earth. And so we're trying to get it right in the sight of God. In Ecclesiastes 9, it says, go thy way, verse 7, go thy way, eat thy bread with joy, drink thy wine with a merry heart, for God hath already accepted thy works. Now this becomes, he's going to tie marriage here. But we said, what? Go eat your bread. What comes from the bread? Oh, I planted the grain. God accepted my works, and therefore I have bread. Enjoy the fruit of your labors. That's a lesson. Enjoy the fruit of your labors. And also drink thy wine. There's the grape juice coming from the vine with a merry heart, for God hath already accepted thy works. Your grain, your grapes, they've grown up. Enjoy that. Enjoy the fruits of your labors. He keeps telling us that's what we get out of life. Why? Because life is going by real fast. Have you noticed? And what does he say? Live joyfully with a wife whom thou lovest, all the days of thy life of vanity. Oh, Ecclesiastes is solemn. It's kind of depressing. Your life of vanity. He's not talking about your life being vanity. He's talking about life being vanity, because there's no substance there, because it's passing by so fast. Listen closely. What is your life of vanity? What is that? It says, given you under the sun all the days of vanity. The days of vanity. That's your life. We're in a life where we have 24 hours, and it starts over and over again until we die. I mean, that's what we're in. And our life is going to be passing very quickly. And here's your youth. And you live joyfully with the wife whom thou lovest, that thou lovest, and the one that you've lived with from your youth. Live joyfully with her all the days that are passing by. And he says, for this is thy portion in life, and the labor wherein thou laborest under the sun. I enjoy the fruits of my labors. I need to enjoy marriage too. And what that lesson is, we sometimes will plan ahead. One day we're going to go see this. One day we're going to do this together. But I've got this, and I got to get this. And we live each day, and we're compressed with activities. And we don't take time to enjoy our life with our wife and our husband and your husband, because we're so fast going through life. He said if there's no substance there, because it's going to be in. That little dash between the day of your birth and the day of your death, what was that all about? Well, I just wanted one day. We'll get doing that one day. And I read a book one time, and the reason I picked it out, it was so small. I was in the library. I said, I think I read it pretty quickly. A doctor wrote it. It says, the precious present. The precious present. And that intrigued me. I wondered, what is the precious present? What present could I be so precious to you? He talked about what the grass smells like in the springtime when you're sitting maybe on a rocking chair, you're getting older, and you see a young man out there sweating, but you smell that cut grass. You got that smell in your memory. And he said, and the young man asked him, how come you're always happy? Well, I'll give myself a precious present. And he talked about a lot of things. The old man would seem like he's always happy because he filled his life with the present now. And what it became later was memories. And we don't take advantage of the precious present is what you have right now. You're taking advantage of that, studying God's word, and we're doing that together. But you live life with your husband and your wife, take advantage of the present. Don't, well, it's going to be a little later. Enjoy the sunsets, enjoy the sunrises, enjoy those moments that you can have together and talk about the day. Don't let those things go by so quickly. Live joyfully with a wife whom thou lovest all the days of thy life of vanity, because that is your portion you're going to get out of life. Those moments that you have with one that you love. It can be indestructible. It can be, and it should be, but it also should be joyful. And we need to bring that to our marriage as well. If there's anyone in the audience this evening that's not a Christian, we want to encourage you to become one. You'll be a great husband, you'll be a great wife if you become a Christian, because you're going to help a marriage thrive, and you're going to have a marriage that's going to be stable as you live your life, and you're finding someone that way too. But the more important thing is the salvation of your soul. Jesus gave himself and died upon the cross to save us all from our sins and add us to his church, his body. That's the sense that he died for, with the washing of water with the word. And what's that? The washing of water is baptism, connected with the teachings of the gospel. And when people heard the gospel after they had put to death Christ and he had been raised from the dead, and he's up in heaven and sends Peter to be involved in preaching, what shall we do? We're going to repent and be baptized, every one of you, in the name of Christ for the remission of your sins. We can help you do that tonight. Or if you need to make confession, you want to have the prayers of all of us, we're here to help you. As we sing this song, please respond.